discussing how contractors can finish strong and finish well when they decide to exit their business. This is the Contractor Succession Podcast.
Welcome to the Contractor Succession Podcast. I'm Marty Wolf, and on the screen, if you're watching, is Scott Good and Scott Lynett. The guy with the Contractor Succession sign behind him is my partner in that company, Contractor Succession, and the co-host of the podcast, Mr. Scott Good. Hi, Scott. How are you today?
Hello, Marty. Great to be here.
And on the other side of it, listening, or if you're watching, is who really looks really nice today, is all dressed up, is Mr. Scott Lynett. Hi, Scott. How are you, sir?
I'm doing well, Marty. How are you?
Good. Well, Scott Lynett, we've been talking about this for a long time, months, trying to get you on the show. So I'm pleased that you're here. A very, very important topic, and you'll hear about that in a second. Let me do a brief introduction of Scott Lynett. First of all, I want to point out his education. From Boston College, Bachelor of Arts, Georgetown University Law Center, Juris Doctor, Villanova University, Master of Business Administration. And if you go on to his website, which is lynettlaw.com, that's L-Y-N-E-T-T, lynettlaw.com, you'll see on the bottom of the page, it says, in short, my sole focus is to help families and businesses avoid collapse after the death or disability of a loved one or business owner. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, Scott, and that's Scott Lynett. So let's start with this, Scott. You give us your definition of estate planning, or you call it legacy planning. So kind of give us an overview of what you do and what it's all about.
Sure. Well, thanks so much, Marty. Thanks. And thank you, Scott, for the opportunity. I call it legacy planning, and it's very intentional that I do that because it's more about money and stuff that we're talking about here, or even a business that we're talking about here. It is about values. It's about what's important to the people. It is about someone making sure that, what they built throughout their lives, and not just the material things, but the relationships and everything else that they built throughout their lives continue, after they pass on and through the generations. And that's really where, creating a tax efficient solution for a business owner. It's not that it's easy, but that's just technical. That's stuff that I can do all the time. It's having those more difficult conversations, and I know you guys speak about this a lot. It's the emotional stuff. It's the relationship stuff. Yeah. And even that's where my own family struggled. We had, I'm a fourth generation family business owner. And when my family was transitioning, we had we had the best lawyers out of Manhattan and Philadelphia. They created the best structures you possibly could imagine from a tax and trust perspective. But unfortunately, that wasn't the stuff that ended up derailing everything. It was the relationships and it was the emotions that ended up causing us the biggest challenges. So I learned from hard experience that you got to spend a lot of your time focused on that, because that's where the real meaty, interesting stuff is.
Yeah. Scott Good, anytime you want to speak up, just go ahead. A matter of fact, I'd like for you to speak up right now, because you've gone through some of the stuff the last few years yourself, and we've gone through it with clients. So any thoughts on what was just said?
Sure. Well, I am one who purchased a couple businesses a while back. And interestingly, I had done a lot of reading. And so you find different people at different ends of the spectrum and how they can handle the emotional side of it. The most recent purchase I did, which goes back about 4.5 years ago, I was expecting the gentleman to, really struggle walking away. And, so we worked out a 6-month arrangement for him to hang around. And at the end of month 1, he said, "Are you done with me? I want to go play golf and tennis." Not typical. not typical. And generally, you have these people who have trouble walking away because they've spent their life, like you said, building something. And while the money may have been fine, it's the feeling of purpose and worth, and making sure that people are able to find purpose and worth outside of their business.
Yeah. Scott, in terms of your law degree, what did you start out, or have you always been in the legacy planning or the estate planning part of your law practice?
No, so I started off my first, my first career iteration. I was an assistant district attorney in Philadelphia, so I was actually a trial lawyer, and it was a job that I loved, Marty. I was in court every single day, you know, putting bad guys in jail and trying to get justice for victims of crime. Um, and it was a great job, terrific time in my life. We were newly married, had new babies, just sort of that has that glow around it.
Sure.
But it was interesting when I started interviewing at some of the big Philadelphia firms back then. It was 20 years ago, and they were all built on this model of hourly billing that a lot of big law firms use. Um, and it was really, my job would have been to roll up as many hours and bill as much as I could. That wasn't why I became a lawyer. I
Hmm.
didn't like that entire model of hourly billing and big law. So I got out of it. Went into business for 20 years. I worked at my family business for 14 years. Was CEO of the company, had over 1,000 employees, and then for a lot of interesting reasons, left, started my own company, and I continue to own that today. I just have 20 employees, and we own a PDQ Print Center up here in Scranton.
Yeah, well, while you were saying that, I was thinking about there's a report I pulled off your website. It says the 6 major mistakes families make when choosing an estate planning attorney and how to make a loving choice for your family. And one of the things you say in this article is, um, if someone wants to bill you hourly, it may not be the right answer if you're going after that wealth planning expert or lawyer. Am I accurate there, Scott?
Yeah, that's it's always, people are always concerned about that, and I've had that concern with lawyers, and I've had that experience, unfortunately, where you call a lawyer with a concern and talk with them on the phone for 45 minutes, and then a month later you get a bill for $300. That doesn't make me want to call my lawyer. um, and in estate planning, it's not a one and done thing. It's constant. The law is constantly evolving, and people's lives are constantly evolving. Especially you guys deal with this all the time, I'm sure, with entrepreneurs. They start new businesses, they go out and buy new real estate, they go out and do new things. That has to be part of the conversation, because all those new assets um, become part of the estate. So if people think they're going to get billed all the time, they're going to hesitate to call. And secondly, from my perspective, it puts the attorney and the client on opposite sides, because if it's to my economic benefit to string out a process as long as possible, that's not a good thing for you to have even in your head, that, oh, the
Yeah.
longer this goes, the more money my lawyer makes. So I always try to set a number that's fair and just say, hey, this is what it's going to cost to get it done. As long as it takes, it takes. I'm more concerned about doing it right.
Yeah. Scott, good. You certainly have had the expertise with lawyers and different things in your job responsibilities and our work at Contractor Succession. What's your thoughts on what Scott Lynett just said in terms of that hourly billing and building and actually, again, it says a loving relationship. So he really wants to Scott Lynett really wants to build a relationship with his clients.
Well, I think as an attorney, I think that's a fantastic model of how to approach it. And I think in any business that ought to be the direction you want to go is having relationships and creating those, working on them, and then when you need to fall back, it's not just about the money. It's about they care, and I like the way you approach that. Um,
Yeah.
Well, it's
Scott,
funny, and oh, I'm sorry, didn't mean
no,
to
no, no. Go ahead. Go ahead.
interrupt, but if you go back, hourly billing is a relatively new phenomenon in the law. It started about 50 years ago. Prior to that, most attorneys were, it was flat fee. I'm going to do the service for you. It's going to cost this amount of money. It's when law really started to become an industry in the 50s and 60s that it
Uh,
went to an hourly billing model. So in reality, the concept of flat fee is more getting back to when a lawyer used to be a trusted advisor to
yeah,
people versus someone who's just transactional.
Well,
yeah,
welcome to our contracting world, because as an HVAC and plumbing service contractor, we use flat rate pricing, and we have this motto that you know the price before we start the work, and we've always felt that that's a great business model.
I couldn't
yeah,
agree with you more.
Kudos to you.
yeah. And that's also the model of contractor succession. You'll know how much you're going to charge before you engage us. All right. So we've already kind of alluded to the fact that there's some pitfalls, especially in this succession planning gig, if you will, especially when they're with families. So let's talk about families. I mean, there can be succession planning moving to employees. There's different ways, but let's stay with families. And we've already talked about some of the pitfalls, emotions being one of them. Let's talk about some other pitfalls that maybe you've seen, Scott, over the years in terms of your practice.
Well, I think the biggest challenge, and I suspect you guys see this a lot, is really when an entrepreneur is build the business, they're the owner, they're the manager, they're the person who controls it, and one of the first conversations you need to have with clients I've found is really separating. Like, control is one thing, ownership is something different, management is something else. And as they start thinking about a transition, it's really understanding that those are three very different things.
Mm,
And so often, if I'm looking at passing, going from one generation to the next, one of the first things I'll do is try to, recapitalize the company into voting and non-voting shares, which then allows an older generation, for example, through voting shares, to retain control of the company while passing on an economic benefit to a younger generation while they, ramp them up and, train them to
yeah,
become great owners and great stewards of the family wealth. So I think that's really one of the first areas where I'll sort of see a light bulb go off over a client's head, where all of a sudden they'll say, "Oh, we never thought of it that way."
yeah,
And as folks get older, control becomes a very important issue. And I think once you can get them comfortable with the idea of, hey, you're going to keep in control here. This is just, it's more of a process that's going to take years, and you're going to have plenty of time to ramp your sons and daughters or whoever it is up to speed before you hand them the keys. They get very comfortable, and then it gets a lot easier to move things along.
mm. When do you suggest, or if there is a suggested time to address this? Should an entrepreneur or business owner, should they wait until they're 68 and not feeling good to start this, or should they start earlier?
I think your approach at contractor succession, having that 3 to 5 year, I'm with you guys. I think more time is even better if you can get more to 7 years, and more time just gives you more options and more ways to get comfortable. And as Scott said earlier, a lot of times part of the process is what, not just retiring from, but what are they going to retire to? And that's really, that's a switch in mindset that I'll see folks go through sometimes. Is they know what they're leaving behind, but they don't know what they're going to. If they have more time to flesh that out and get comfortable with it, you're more likely to have a successful transition at that moment, like that gentleman Scott alluded to earlier. That's
Yeah.
what you want.
Exactly.
Yeah, yeah. So you're listening to the Contractor Succession Podcast. My name is Marty Wolf. My partner in that company is Scott Good. He's with me. And our guest is Scott Lynett. And his company, his organization is LynettLaw.com. That's Lynet, LynettLaw.com. And he is in the business of estate planning, or as he calls it, legacy planning, and he's pointing out some reasons why he calls it legacy planning. Scott Good, what's on your brain? What are you thinking about? He's giving us some good information, huh?
Yeah, it's interesting, Scott. I just got done this weekend reading a book called Secrets of Succession by a gentleman by the name of Gerard Gust. I think it's Gust, and it's about um, family business and transition, and the process that it's the son who explains how they went through with his father who had built a business. They were a like a restoration type business in the contracting world, and they go through all of the different pitfalls and all of the different things that he and his father went through in the process. And this was about, Marty, maybe you can, I think it was about a 10 or 12-year process. I mean, the son actually started working when he was in his mid teens, went to college, came back, and was kind of the, if you will, the heir apparent. But there was obviously a lot he needed to understand about how that worked. And so, you talk about a time frame when you're dealing with family businesses and you've got a younger kid who hasn't even gotten into the business world yet. Perfect example. My son, my youngest son, Jordan, his original intention when he was in college was to come work for me and eventually, work with me and maybe take over the business. 2 years into it, he said, "This isn't for me, Dad." And so, it kind of turned my whole concept of where my business was going upside down. But it just wasn't right, and we both acknowledged it and knew that it was time for to rethink that model.
Yes, Scott. Do you run into, or how often, or do you run into a situation where, in fact, the parents, the older ones, let's say the ones who want to go through the succession planning, where they may say, well, my daughter Joanne, I really want her to have it, or I want Jerry, my son, to have it. And then maybe when you get talking to people, Joanne and Jerry go like, "What? What are you talking about?" Do you ever run into that, Scott?
Yeah, I think Marty. It's such a great point, and sometimes it's very interesting to see the dynamic in the room that can play out where you have a son or a daughter that's in the room, and they're saying something just to please their parent, and it's not really in their heart.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah,
and those can be really difficult conversations because Scott, good kudos to you on being able to accept that and understand that about your son. That's just awesome. Some folks get bought into their own dream of what their legacy is, and they've been talking about it so much and it's become so much a part of who they are. They struggle. They've always assumed that because it's their dream it's going to be their child's dream, and so those are those really difficult emotional conversations that you can get into. We had a situation once that I was dealing with, and you had a son who clearly didn't want to be in the business and he was just doing it to make his father happy, and it started to manifest itself in these little ways of acting out around the business.
yeah,
I mean, to the point where he finally had to sit down with the father and have this conversation of, don't you understand that where he is in his head? It goes back to those, and part of my job sometimes is being that, creating that safe space where
yeah,
you can have an honest conversation and getting a little vulnerable too, which is that can be really hard. Vulnerability is one of the most difficult things for people
yeah,
to understand. It's really hard to put yourself out there, especially when it's a family dynamic and you're going to be
yeah,
with this person at holidays for the rest of your life. Like there's so many other layers playing on. So it's,
yeah,
having those "what hat am I wearing" moments when you're in that
yeah,
room can
yeah.
really be challenging. And again, Scott, I'm so impressed with the way you handled your son. That's terrific.
Thank you. It
Yeah,
was
and
a challenge. It was a challenge because that you are talking legacy, and that's one of the things. But we also both realized that he had to be happy, and he looked at his father and said, "You know what? That's not the life I want. I want something different."
Hmm.
So
yeah. Well, what do you mean, Scott Good? I think you're logging in 30 hours a week now at this point, aren't you?
I'm somewhere between 20 and 25. So
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah. We all know that's not true. Okay, so let's go to another topic because and by the way, folks, if you go to lineatlaw.com, you can find different articles. There's a book that you can download. There's different things, some of which I'm referring to as we speak. But one of the articles, I think it's off your website, Scott, is one of the greatest gifts to your family is to plan for incapacity. Incapacity. Boy, we have we deal with that, but
Mhm.
more importantly, Scott Lynett, we are always saying, you know what, I'll use the number of 68. You're 68, and I hope you live to be 100. I hope you have a healthy life. But something can go wrong soon. you know. So talk to me about that. Like, how do you approach that with a family?
So, one of the first things I do when I get a new client, Marty, one of the first things I do is just sit down with them and check what I call the foundational plan, which is just making sure you have the basic documents of a power of attorney, so that if you do become disabled, if something happens, someone can act on your behalf, they can access your bank accounts, that you have a healthcare power of attorney and a living will. If I'm dealing with a business owner, I'll say to them, if you get, if all of a sudden you're out of commission for 6 months, who in your company is going to step up, and who's able to take the reins? And I'm sure you've experienced this as well, where they'll look across the table at you and say, if I'm not there, we're smoked. And so, right. So those are, it's really having those conversations with folks and realizing we got to, this, I always tell my clients, the planning we're doing today isn't going to benefit you. This is going to benefit your employees. This is going to benefit your kids. And this is a way for you to show leadership and love to the people you care about at a time when you're not going to be able to be there. For whatever reason, your leadership and your love can come through in a really well thought out plan. Um, and so I try to reframe it that way, that this is something you're doing for other people that you care about.
That's
But
great.
it's, and then just really push them. And then I try to put the legal mechanisms in place so that if, God forbid, something happens and a business owner drops dead, you're not going to have a company that's going to go into probate for 2 years,
Yeah.
lose all its value, and then end up being worth nothing. You've got to have a good succession plan in place to preserve the value for whether for liquidation or for a succession, whichever they want, if something happens to them.
Scott, in terms of who you'll work with, I guess, just about anybody, if you will. But let's talk geography. I mean, we have clients from across the country. I would assume that if somebody goes to Lynett Law, you'll talk to just about anybody. In terms of an initial discussion, am I accurate with that?
Yeah, that's fair to say. The principles of what I do are the same across the country. Now, the state law, I'm only licensed to practice in PA, so but I'm part of a nationwide network of attorneys that
Yeah.
can work in any state. So we're fortunate that I have that at my fingertips.
Yeah. I would encourage everybody listening or watching to go to lineatlaw.com. Again, there's some articles and resources right there, but I know that Scott and his team would be happy to answer any of your initial questions. As you can tell, he's Scott, you're on the show because you're kind of distinct in what you do and how you approach it. So yeah, Scott, good.
Yeah, I wanted. Yeah, let
What
me
should
jump
I
in
have
here.
asked?
Yeah,
Go.
let me jump in here. I love that article. I read that article the other day, and I always make the joke. I live next to Penn State University in a college town, so I always use the analogy. Are you prepared if you get run over by the beer truck? What's going to happen to you or your family or your business, and are you prepared for that? And and one of the things, in addition to having all the legal stuff set up, is having a management team or leadership to be able to backfill you, um, and the process that you go through by identifying who those people are is important. But the next part is, can they really do it, right? And trying to make sure that when Marty and I are working with folks, our goal is to get those people coached up to be able to run it. If indeed that beer truck does the brakes cut loose and is running down, College Avenue after you.
No,
Yeah.
and Scott, you raise a great point there because I'm the lawyer. I'm just one leg of the stool in this whole process. Someone like contractor succession, exit planning, good exit planners like you guys are is critical. You need a great financial advisor who can really help you plan out, especially if there's going to be a liquidity event. How are you going to make that money last through the rest of your life? How are you going to handle your children? And then the third piece is you got to really know someone who knows the tax stuff well. You got to have a great CPA. So
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. I can I can do the legal part of it well, but it takes consultants like you guys on the management side. That's the secret sauce, is having all the components.
Well, and back to that Secrets of Succession book, which I really got a lot out of that. He was talking about your core team, which is really your attorney and your tax guy. Those are the two that you need to get with initially to figure out, make sure you have all those legal documents in place. Number two is the coach and the consultants to help you coach your business up to make it worth more. So when you do sell it, and these guys have protected you, making sure that you're not paying too much tax and that you've dotted all the I's and crossed all the T's, that you actually get something for all your efforts.
Yeah. Scott Lynett, let's hit on this because this is another common problem we see both from the CPA side of things and from the attorney side of things. So my brother-in-law does real estate law. So
Oh my gosh,
you already know
where you're going.
you already know where I'm going. He's my brother-in-law. He's an attorney. Can he do this stuff for me? What's your thoughts, Scott Lynett?
It's funny. I know one of your other guests spoke about this, and it's always so challenging when you have that CPA who's been there a long, long time and is a great guy and who's like a member of the family. A lot of times they have what we in the industry call door lawyers, which is whatever comes in the door, they can handle. You got a DUI, no problem. You need your parking ticket fixed, I got it. You want a will, no problem. Tuesday, I'm available. I'll close on your house the day after that. That's
I got to write that down. Door lawyers. I love it.
Yeah. So, and that's why this is all I do, 24/7. And that's
Yeah.
when I talk to my clients, my grandfather, I love talking about my grandfather. I grew up in a 3-generation house. So he was in my house growing up, and he was an old school general practitioner surgeon from World War II. So back in the day. And he would do, he'd have ankle surgery on Monday and brain surgery on Tuesday. And at the time in the 50s and 60s, that was okay. And I'm sure he did a great job. But if I needed brain surgery today, with all due respect to my grandfather, I'm not going to that kind of a surgeon. I'm going to a guy who this is all he does is brain surgery all day, every day. And I think when having that conversation can be challenging, but like I've even, I have a couple of clients who said, I feel like I'm cheating, but like they feel like they're cheating with me because they haven't told their lawyer who they've had for 20 years, who's done all their stuff for them. They bring me in on the side to plan and don't want to tell anybody.
Yeah.
And I said, listen, your lawyer, for what he's done, he's fantastic. I couldn't do what he does, handle all the stuff that he handles. I just have this little area that I couldn't do what he does, and he can't do what I do. He
Well
can't
said.
he can't do what I can do for you. So
Yeah.
I'm just here for this part. I'm not here to displace anybody. I want him to keep doing what he's doing, but just one spot where I can work well. But I agree with you. It can be people. They can get very caught up with that, and I understand it. It's all. I
Yeah.
have a girl who cuts my hair who I absolutely love. And if she's closed and I go to somebody else, I feel guilty about it. I feel like I have to explain.
Yeah.
Ashley,
Well,
I'm
we need,
sorry. I was thinking about you the whole time that other girl was cutting my hair.
all right. Well, we need to start to wrap up. But Scott Lynett, what haven't I asked you, or what point or two would you like to make? Again, we're reaching out to our audience at Contractor Succession, which is more than contractors, as I think I've shared with you. We have people in all different kind of spaces, thank goodness, and business is good. But what didn't I ask you, or what points you want to drive home in terms of, kind of summing up our conversation?
Marty, this was a terrific conversation. I think, one thing I always say to my clients, I have three jobs really. I want to keep you out of court. I want to keep your family out of conflict, and I want to protect what you have built. And really, those are, and I think your philosophy of contractor succession is very similar. It is, how do we make sure that we preserve the wealth that these folks have spent their lifetimes building, but also preserve the relationships that they've built, because those are just as important, if not more so.
Scott Good, any last comments or thoughts?
No, I love Scott Lynett's approach. I'm so impressed with the way you run your business and how you handle this, and the conversations are always end well, I believe. And if I were somebody looking to work out some sort of succession through family or my employees, you're my guy. So that's
A public endorsement. Wow.
yeah,
Yeah, very kind of
absolutely.
you. Thank you.
So,
Excellent.
folks, you have been listening to the Contractor Succession Podcast. Again, my name is Marty Wolf, and Scott Good is my partner in Contractor Succession and also the co-host of this podcast. And Scott Lynett has been our guest, and it has been a fantastic discussion. His organization, again, is lynettlaw.com, Lynet, lynettlaw.com. Go there. Check out, there's some resources that you can pull. You can start to learn more about it. I would encourage anybody at any age to start thinking about this stuff now. I don't care if you're in business for a year. If you're listening to this, start thinking about this stuff now. There's a famous guy, I won't say his name, but he wrote a book called Built to Sell. And that's the way everybody should be thinking about their business. You should be building it to sell it, because eventually you'll leave your business. You'll leave it with your boots on, or you'll leave it in a good way. So go to Scott Lynett's website, lynettlaw.com. Scott Lynett, thank you so much for being with us today. So informational. We appreciate it.
Marty, Scott, thank you so much. This is a real pleasure.
Thank you for listening to the Contractor Succession Podcast. You can learn more about us at our website, contractorsuccession.com. You can also find us on Facebook, LinkedIn, and Twitter.